Well, we are back talking about things you can do to help feed your chickens from things that you can either collect or find around your homestead or nearby. So this is kind of another little installment in this sort of feeding chickens series. And this one's a little different because the point here is to offer up some ideas of things that you can either find or collect or use that would otherwise be waste. And I know we've talked about some similar ideas, but this is a little more specific to various seeds and that sort of thing that you can find likely around your homestead or very close nearby, or that you can collect from things such as peppers, for example, that when you collect a lot of it over time can actually add up. And then there'll be a little bonus discussion on something completely different and completely random towards the end. So stay tuned for that. So again, this is not really instructional or prescriptive per se, but I wanted to show you some things that we've been saving sort of this last year that can go towards your chicken food. So one, real simple one. Now there are some squash seeds in here that kind of happened by accident, but basically this entire container so far, which doesn't look like much, but that is seeds from our peppers. Every pepper that came into the house that was getting processed for eating, I stripped the seeds out, dried them, and I've added them to this container. So this is something that the chickens enjoy, and it doesn't matter whether it's sweet peppers or whether it's hot peppers. The chickens are not like mammals. They're not bothered with the hot peppers. Another one, squash seeds. Squash seeds are excellent, and you can do them sort of fresh, or what I'm going to call fresh, like you see here. These were taken sort of out of a squash. It was actually a day ago, but it was one of our winter squash that was in storage. You just end up with a bunch of seeds. The chickens like them. But you can also stockpile seeds. So this is actually from our yellow crookneck squash, which is a summer squash. We don't store them long term, but if we have a bunch of them get ahead of us, we really don't fret about it too much, because as you can see, you just break those open once they're nice and hard, take the seeds out, and you've got another source of chicken food. This one I find really interesting. It's a bit dark, so I do apologize. This is curled dock. Now, curled dock is also completely edible by humans, as are the squash seeds, of course. But curled dock, where we live, is basically a plant that's been introduced from Europe, and it's pretty common. It has a lot of good qualities, but the seeds are extremely simple to collect. I think we may have spent an hour collecting this. We actually had about, I'm not going to say double the volume, but we had more because we took some of it. And as you can see here, we broke that down or ground that up into kind of a flour. This is a bit versatile because you can add this flour mixture to a cooked chicken food, but you can do the exact same thing and use it as human food. We just, we're going to do both. And another one, same thing. This is collecting otherwise weed seeds. This is lamb's quarters. This was interesting because this is human grade right now. I collected it while it was quite dry. Chickens love it, especially in the off seasons. They definitely consume a lot of it sort of in the fall when it's available to them, at least what they can reach. It didn't take very long to harvest this. This was a really, really simple thing to do. It doesn't look like much, but the one thing, without going into the nutritional value of any of these are all seeds, and they all have slightly different values. i.e. they're not exactly the same as things like oats and wheat and barley for their nutritional content. Now, would you really be trying to collect enough of these, any of these, to make a base diet for your chickens? Absolutely not. Most of these things couldn't be scaled up without probably some serious land and some serious equipment to a level similar to what we do with our base diet of wheat, that you could really sort of, feed your chickens this exclusively. But the point is here, everything that was on the table here Granted, it didn't look like a lot sitting there, but I mean, the squash seeds is a great example. Every time we eat squash, we get these. And so this is like a byproduct that has great value for the chickens. But all of those seeds, it was very simple to do. It was very simple to collect, and it didn't take a lot of time. The peppers. All we did is every time a pepper got cut open, put the center aside and took the seeds out. And the weed seeds that we collected from the lamb's quarters and the curled dock, I think maybe I spent an hour / we spent an hour actually physically collecting it. Then you put it aside to dry for a little bit, and then we kind of sifted it out to get rid of some of the bigger pieces. So it was really, really simple. And that's the point, because you're collecting these things that they would eat quite readily otherwise, so that you can get yourself through the times of year, if you live somewhere like we do, where you actually have winter, that they can't go out and consume these. So the little bonus addition here is this funny looking jar filled with stuff. I'm going to explain what this is. I think this has a lot of promise, although it does require a little bit of effort and a little bit of material on the chicken keeper's part. So very similar to the concept of sort of cooking food for the chickens. As you can see, we still have the pot on the wood stove cooking away. You can can food for your chickens. People do this for things like cats and dogs. The premise for chickens, though, I think, and where this to me is a bit promising, is you can take things that may be a little bit of a waste product or at a bit of an inconvenient time, i.e. you don't want to feed it right away because you want to make it last later, i.e. into the winter. You can take a mix of things. If you really look at this, I mean, you can see there's beans in there, both green beans and dry beans. We had some tomato product. There's a little bit of meat. I think it's lamb and some old leftover goat when we cleaned out the freezer. We've canned fish, whole fish, the goldfish, for example. Works really well. You're just pressure canning it, which means it's shelf stable, and you have it sitting there without having to run freezers for later. Now, we do freeze some food, and we're kind of toying with this because, again, this isn't really prescriptive of what to put in here. The point is, you can kind of put whatever you want in that jar. If you're in the middle of a harvest season, you're growing something like kohlrabi or broccoli, and you have a lot of leaves and stalks, those can be pressure canned or frozen for later use for the chickens. Because chances are, when you get into those volumes that you're growing enough of those food items for yourself, you're going to have more than you could also eat, which is where it's nice to preserve some of that harvest for later use by the chickens. So basically going to leave it there, kind of looking at this motley assortment of things that we've collected to feed to the chickens and incorporate into their winter diet. And I think that's the key. This is not necessarily things that you would collect to feed them year round. But if you live in an environment that has a distinct winter like we do, when foraging is not an option, similar to your own human diet, there are things you can do to help reduce the cost of feeding your chickens and also give them sort of a well-rounded diet, i.e. some variety, because even though chickens do perform decently on the same thing day after day after day, at the same time, given the choice, I think many chickens would choose the variety. And that's something we as homesteaders on a homestead scale can certainly give them. So some food for thought and some things to think about potentially if you're looking at sort of bringing your own chicken food production or chicken food needs a little closer to home.